To other news now, and the appeal by the jihadi bride Shamima Begum in her interview with the Times newspaper to come home to Britain has fallen on deaf ears, in the government at least. The Security Minister Ben Wallace said she would get no diplomatic help getting back. Actions have consequences, he said. Those would include being investigated by the police, and that, Mr Wallace said, applies to everyone coming back from the conflicts in Syria and Iraq.
Another young British woman, a mother, in a refugee camp tonight.
I would like the British government to help us and our children to get out of here and to accept us.
Her request sounds familiar among the foreigners who've just escaped from ISIS.
Yes, I have children. My husband is dead, and we have been trying to escape from Daesh for a long time.
She chose a new home in Syria, but now wants to return to her old one. Because this is what the utopia looks like now. ITV News was on the front line overnight in eastern Syria. Despite the gunfire, the Western-backed forces have little left to do. Territorial defeat is days away. It might even be closer than that. The race now is for the exit. 4 years ago, it was the other way. Shamima Begum joined ISIS alongside her 2 school friends who slipped away from East London during the February half-term. This is her now. She's made it to a camp where 6 other British women and 13 children are staying. During her time in ISIS, she married a fighter, had 2 children who both died, and is now heavily pregnant. But she shows little remorse.
I don't regret it. I'm scared that this baby's going to get sick in this camp. That's why I really want to get back to Britain, because I know it will be taken care of.
She's always going to be our baby.
Her family say they're relieved and that the British government should bring her home, but it won't.
We're not going to put at risk the lives of British civil servants and officials to go into the centre of Syria in the middle of a civil war to look for terrorists or terrorist supporters.
But what about the other Bethnal Green girls? Khadija Sultana is believed to have been killed in August 2016 when her house was hit by an airstrike. The third, Amira Abbasi, is thought to still be alive in Baghouz, the last part of Islamic State territory. 145 women are estimated to have travelled from the UK to support IS in Iraq and Syria, but of them, only 2 are confirmed to have returned home.
It's not, I think, that people are uncaring about this, but on the other hand, you can't have somebody in the country, really, who is trying to act as a bit of a spokesperson for ISIS. We've got to remember this whole notion of jihadi bride is basically justifying rape, forced marriage, modern slavery, and ISIS is still active.
Authorities in almost every country are now deciding what to do with the citizens who went to ISIS and now want to come back.
Well, Rohit joins us now from a security conference in Munich where world leaders are meeting with the future of Islamic State high on the agenda. And Rohit, we've talked a lot in the past about what happens to Western men who go to fight for ISIS, but the situation for women and particularly teenagers like Shamima Begum even more complicated.
Yeah, that's correct, Julie. We've heard so many times during today this phrase, jihadi brides, and that's sometimes an unuseful phrase because it tends to underestimate the amount of agency used by so many of the women who decided themselves, in many of the cases that we followed, to travel to Syria. That was their own decision. But let's look at this case specifically. Shamima Begum is being held separately to the men. She was treated differently inside ISIS to the men. She's being treated differently now by US-backed Kurdish forces, all the women being held separately to the men, and that is for a reason. Many countries, including the French, are treating their female nationals separately to the males too. But remember, in this case, the 2 Bethnal Green women went out there as 3 Bethnal Green girls. They were children, and at the time the then Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police said they had nothing to fear from returning home. And so you know, many government sources have indicated that they will be treated now as victims. But listen carefully to that interview. Shamima Begum appeared to indicate that although she rejected the reality of ISIS now, she didn't reject the idea of it.
Rohit, thank you very much indeed for that.